Hello and welcome. You're viewing the Citizens Journalist podcast, Mesa County Compass, that brings you the news that you can use from a different point of view. I'm Ruth.
I'm Lisa.
And together we are Mesa County Compass. Our goal is to create an informed, current, active citizenry armed with the facts. We will be covering what's new to you, what it means to you, what you can do about it, and provide you access to the decision makers when we can. Welcome to Mesa County Compass this afternoon. We are having a special guest this afternoon who is in town for a little bit and wanted to bring you what he has to say about election integrity. This is Mark Cook, and he is our cyber expert, our expert on election integrity, and he is the handcountroadshow.org. So get me all straightened out there. Welcome, Mark. And would you please give us a little bit about your background, who you are, how you came to do what you're doing?
Sure. Well, I'm not going to be looking at a computer screen during this, so I can take the old glasses off.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm born and raised in Colorado.
Okay.
Born in Denver, raised in Evergreen. So lived in Colorado my whole life. And I was jettisoned kind of into election integrity just after the 2020 election, when someone called me and asked me if I would go out to DC and help the people out there figure out where the fraud was in the election, figure out what had happened. I really wanted to know myself, and I did not like big cities, especially not DC, because growing up in Evergreen, kind of a small mountain town.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
I did not want to go to DC, but I really wanted to know the truth because I knew in my gut something was wrong. We can't have half the country thinking that everything was fine and then half the country thinking an election was stolen. That's not normal.
Right.
And I knew it had to be one or the other. It can't be both. So I wanted to get to the bottom of it. And I decided, well, sometimes, as my mom has always told me, you have to stretch to grow. So I said, all right, I'm going to do something a little bit uncomfortable, and I'm just going to go out to D.C., and I'm going to let happen whatever happens, and I'm just going to hunt for the truth. And so I went out there, and I ended up working out of Sidney Powell's war room right after she had been evacuated. So it was a group of people that were left after that. And I said, my name is Mark Cook. I am a computer guy from Colorado. I'm happy to help in any way. And they said, well, unfortunately, we don't have any computers here, so we don't know what you could do. I said, well, do you need computers? And they said, yeah, we could use some. I said, okay, well, I can fix that problem. So I borrowed some keys in a car. I got in the car. I found a computer store nearby, and I went and filled that car up with every computer I thought a group of people would need. And I spent the next, I think it was 3 days and 2 nights, setting this whole computer system environment up so we could all research the election issues. And then the goal was to find the fraud before January 6th. And at first I thought I was only going to be there for 3 days, but it turned out after 3 days of setting everything up and people asking me what a scanner was and what a tabulator was and ballot definitions, that the people that were there didn't understand the technology part of the election system. They understood the political side, but not the tech.
Now, how did you come by all that knowledge?
I started programming when I was 10 years old, so I have been a nerdy little kid from a very young age, and I always had a passion for computers and a passion for technology. So if it had electricity going through it, I liked to figure out how it worked and kind of figure out how to master it. And so that's what I've always done from a very young age. I started my IT company when I was 13 years old.
Wow.
And I've had a business in Colorado since I think around 1986, 1987.
Oh my
right
goodness. Okay, so you've been in it a long time.
I've been doing this for a couple minutes.
Yes, you have.
Yeah.
Yes, you have.
Kind of odd, huh, Ruth?
All
I'm
right.
just teasing you. Yeah. So, and how did you get, I know they contacted you. How did they know you?
So It was kind of interesting. I went to an American Priority Festival event a year or two before that because I wanted to get more involved. And it was an event where, conservative voices were speaking at. And I felt so disconnected because I just focused on my life the whole time. I wasn't paying attention to politics. But I was also noticing, and I was very vocal on Facebook back in the days. I was the guy that had no filter, and I called it like I saw it. And I saw our country start to go kind of off the rails a bit. I started to see things that were very concerning to me. And I was vocal about it, but I realized I wasn't involved politically, and I figured something in the politics is allowing these things to happen in our country. So I wanted to correct that and get more involved. And so I saw this event, American Priority Festival, and turns out I'm an American and I like American priorities. So I went to this in order to expose myself to more people and more ideas to try to get more connected. And I was there with there were speakers there. And one of them was Nate Kane, who was the FBI whistleblower for the Uranium One deal.
Okay.
And he was speaking up on stage at that event, and I was sitting at the table, and I wasn't there with anyone. It was just me, and I saw a table with a few extra chairs, so I went and sat on it in the middle of the room, and that turned out to be Nate's parents.
Oh.
Okay.
So that's where I met Nate's parents, and his dad is Dennis, and they got my number, I guess, when I was there. So fast forward, 2020 election, the week after, I get a call from Dennis Kane, and he says, will you go out to D.C. to help my son Nate? So that's how I
That's how
ended
you
up
got
out there.
into it then.
That's how
Okay.
all because of an event, a couple years prior.
And how much time did you spend looking, and then what? Then what did you do?
Well, I set up the computers for that 3-day period, and then I realized that all these people that are there are curious about things that I understand, but they didn't. So I realized I can't just go out there for 3 days, set stuff up, and leave. I can't abandon my fellow citizens. Everyone there is trying to find the fraud. They knew something happened. They just didn't know what it was that occurred and how it happened.
Right.
And so I wasn't going to abandon my fellow American citizens. So I went on Amazon and I ordered more shirts and pants and toiletries, and because I only had a few days of clothes with me. So I had to order all that stuff. And I realized I was going to stay there longer. Well, I lived in that hotel until December 24th is when I checked out.
Oh, my word.
So I was there a week after the 2020 election, all the way through, every single day, until December 24th. And the only reason I left on December 24th is because everyone else left. I was the only one left in that hotel, in that group. And I didn't know if anyone was going to come back. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing there. I couldn't afford to, I mean, it was an expensive hotel. I couldn't afford to stay there on my own.
Right.
And so I flew back here. So I flew back to DIA. And when my flight landed, I got a phone call from a friend that invited me over for Christmas Eve dinner.
Oh, nice.
So I went straight to his house from the airport and had dinner. And then I picked up the phone and I called a friend of mine that I had met when I was out in D.C. And that's Garrett Ziegler, who worked for Peter Navarro in the White House.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
And so I had met him while I was out in D.C. I just wished him a Merry Christmas, and I wished his wife a Merry Christmas. And he said that his wife had gone home back to Illinois, and she was 9 months pregnant. So I'm glad she got out of there.
Right.
But I was worried about him. And I know what happened to Seth Rich. Seth Rich was also 20s and got murdered on the streets of D.C., I think on K Street, a couple years prior. And they stole that, that mugging that they took the flash drive, but they didn't take his wallet.
Right.
It's kind of weird when, muggers do that. But now I know what was on the flash drive. So, fast forward, Garrett's there by himself. I just asked him, do you want some company out there? And he actually said, yes, I would love some company. So I left my friend's house. I went back to DIA and flew back to DC immediately after dinner. And then I moved in with Garrett.
Oh, for
So
heaven's sakes.
I lived with Garrett from Christmas Day all the way through January 19th. And almost every day I would drop him off at the White House. He'd work all day long. I'd go back to his place, or I'd find a cafe or restaurant, and I'd work during the day. And then he'd call me when he was done, and I'd go into D.C. and pick him up at the White House.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, I've had a
think
very
so.
interesting beginning in all this. So
Yeah.
I've been injected right into the heart of this. So during the 2020 coup, I was right there on ground zero this whole time.
Wow. That must have been very interesting for you.
Yeah.
It was
Maybe
very-
you were arrested for just being part of a plot.
Well, speaking of arrested, so on January 6th, well, here, I'll back up. January 5th, I'm sitting in Garrett's, and my doorbell rings in Colorado, and I have a Ring doorbell. So I'm like, who's at my door? And I look at my phone, and there are two individuals, a man and a woman, dressed in black suits with a black SUV parked outside
Oh, okay.
on January 5th. It was the FBI, and they wanted to know why I had a We the People banner on my Facebook page. They asked, why do you have a We the People banner
Why
on your
would
Facebook
that be
page?
of concern to
I
them?
would, that was also what I was thinking. And I told them, well, because I respect and support the Constitution. It seemed like a weird question.
Right.
Like, I'm an American citizen. Why would it be a problem if I have the Constitution behind me,
Right.
you know, on my Facebook page? So they asked me about that. And then they asked me what I thought should happen the next day at the Capitol. Isn't that an interesting thing to be asking me the day before January 6th?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
It's almost as if they had planned it and they were trying to get some other people involved. They probably knew where I was, and they were probably trying to pin something on me. And they kept asking me over and over again, what do you think should happen tomorrow? And I kept telling them the same thing that our president told us, which was, please, I think he said, peacefully and patriotically protest or demonstrate, whatever word he used. I said the exact same phrase to them. And they kept asking me the same question. I kept giving them the same answer. And then they asked, are you aware of anything else that is supposed to be happening then? Or, you know, I wasn't, so I said no. And they said, well, if you're aware of anything, if you hear of anything, will you let us know? I said, sure.
What have I got to hide?
Yeah, and I have nothing to hide.
Right.
And so I said, sure. And they left. And that was that.
That's weird.
The day before January 6th. So on January 6th, I dropped Garrett off at the White House. And then I was thinking about going downtown to be there with all the citizens. And I just, something in my gut, my heart, brain, whatever, said, don't stay in D.C. So I just had a bad feeling. So I left. I dropped him off at the White House. I went right back to his place. And I just sat and worked all day. And I watched everything that went down on my phone and on my computer. And then he called me toward the end of the day and said, all right, come pick me up. And I went in to pick him up. And while I was waiting to pick him up, because I couldn't get anywhere near the White House at that time. So he had to meet me blocks and blocks away. So I was sitting, I think it was by a library where he popped out of the subway. And I was waiting there. And I asked some of the citizens that were walking by, because they were just like in a daze after all the events on January 6th.
Right.
And I asked them, I said, can you guys tell me what happened? What actually happened? And, you know, they said there were people there that were not us. They were dressed as us, but they were not us. And they mentioned, I remember one guy said you could tell because they all had a particular type of flagpole. It was all an identical flagpole, and they got off from a bus. So that was what I heard on January 6th, that afternoon, right downtown, right where it all happened.
That's interesting because those kind of things have not been brought out.
That's correct, but they're going to be. I've only told maybe 3 or 4 people.
Huh.
Now you're telling the world.
Now I'm telling a few more. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. So, and I may come. When the timing's right. I mean, clearly, that's an odd phone call or odd doorbell experience that I had, and for them to already be there and specifically asking about what I thought should happen the next day shows me that there is some premeditation and some planning of some sort. And so the public will all know soon enough.
And so, were you continuing to work on that for the past 4 years, or?
Yeah.
How?
Yeah. When I
off and on?
got back on January 19th. The last 3 people in the White House were Trump, Peter Navarro, and Garrett Ziegler. And I picked Garrett up that day on the 19th. Everyone else had kind of abandoned Trump at that time. They were looking for their next deal, which was really sad to hear because I I respect him and his entire family and all the good people in the administration that are doing their best to try to really save this country and return it to the people.
Right.
God bless all of them. And for God to give us this new opening to be able to have, round 2 try at fixing all this, I think is amazing. But to answer your question, I went back home on the 19th of January, and I started getting phone calls from people all over the country asking me if I would help them understand how the election system worked. So I started traveling. I'd fly into a state, I'd speak to a group, and then I'd fly back. And I had done that for months and months on end. And then, we all heard about the PCAPs, the Mike Lindell packet captures, the PCAPs.
Right.
We saw the animation with all these other countries like attacking and hacking our election. And I know what packet captures are. I work with them in my job. I've worked with them for 30 plus years.
And I don't know what they are.
It's like a digital recording. So if I had a tape recorder and I hit record and I recorded our conversation and I could play it back later, we could hear our conversation again.
Right.
So a packet capture is a digital recording of communication between one or more computers.
Okay.
So you can play back what goes over the network cable, essentially, or what, the wireless connection. And so it's just a playback, a recording of communication between computers. That's all it is.
Okay.
And so if there was a hack from other countries that came in and hacked our country, and there's a claimed recording of this attack, I wanted to see the recording, or part of the recording, to validate that it was real and not made up. Because I was worried someone had made it up and told Mike and was lying to Mike and then using Mike to distract the whole country. That was my fear.
And so what did you find?
Well, I begged and begged and begged to get involved with it, to see the packets. Eventually, at the Cyber Symposium, I was invited to be on the red team to investigate those packet captures, that recording.
Okay.
And when it was handed to me to examine, I looked at what was handed to me, and that was not a packet capture. They told me it was. I looked at it. It wasn't even close. And so I did not receive any evidence that existed.
Interesting.
Very.
And I wouldn't even know what I saw. So here you go.
Well, and that's why I wanted to
there
look
you
at
go.
it. Because the whole world, most of the people in the world don't know what a packet capture is. I happen to know what it is. And there's a few, nerdy people that do know. I just wanted to make sure that it was real, because I didn't want Mike telling everyone it's real if it wasn't. And Mike is not a cyber expert.
No.
He's just a patriotic American that, he never stops fighting for this country, which God bless him. God bless him. I'll tell you what, we wouldn't have the access to the information. We wouldn't be where we're at. We wouldn't still be in the fight if it wasn't for Mike Lindell. And I'm not saying everyone knew how to do this perfectly. A lot of people made mistakes along the way. There wasn't an instruction manual of how to deal with stolen elections. So none of us Americans knew how to deal with this.
Right.
So we all kind of have dealt with it in our own ways. So I wouldn't say everything that everyone has done has been perfect. I'm sure I've made some mistakes along the way too. So we have to have some compassion for those people and some consideration for some mistakes being made along the way. But I do believe most people's heart is in the right place, and we got to get to the bottom of this. So God bless people like Mike Lindell. I know Patrick Byrne he's offered a lot and donated a lot to keep the American citizens alive and hunting through all this. So there have been some good people that were just very key in keeping this going. And I'm honored to be able to do my little part. I mean, those men lost millions of dollars.
Oh, they did indeed.
Yeah, I had a lot less to lose. But I mean, if they were willing to risk it all, I don't feel so bad, losing everything I have spent my life doing either, because I know it's for a noble cause. We have to return elections to the people of this country, because if the citizens don't have control of their own elections, we don't have freedom. It's only a facade of freedom, and I'm not okay with that. And we can't hand this to our kids and our grandkids as a facade. They got to get the real deal. They deserve actual freedom.
So you've got two, tell me if I'm wrong, you've got two different strains going. One is still looking at that 2020 election, but two, you're trying to prevent future elections from going through the same thing. Is that right, or
I'm not focusing so much on the 2020 election. I know that we have a massive problem with our election systems in general. The citizens have lost control of them. The corporations have taken over, and the government has taken over.
Okay.
Well, the government and the corporations are not supposed to be in charge of our elections. We are. We own this country. We know in everything in this country. And our elections are also ours. We use our elections to measure our will, to choose who serves us in our government.
Right.
Our government's not supposed to be in charge of the election at all. So that's a big problem for me. So that's where my passion is returning elections back to the people and putting it in their hands.
And so what's the plan for that?
Well, oh gosh, it's a lot of things. We have to get people to realize that they are not servants of the government. The government is servants for the people.
Right.
They're the servants of the people. And we need to get the government to understand that, and we have to get the people to understand that. They're both under, I think, a different idea. So we've got to fix that. We need to remove elections from these corporate controls and put it back in the hands of the citizens. Very simple. Voter, from top to bottom, our voter registration system needs to be taken from the state and put back into the hands of the counties.
Okay.
So we need to have paper voter rolls, just like we need paper ballots to keep the attack surface low and the transparency high. We also need paper voter registration cards. Same concept, just two different systems. We need to go back to paper voter registration cards. We can add a digital component to it to make it transparent and make it checkable from county to county to make sure we don't have duplicate registrations.
Okay.
But the core of it has to be paper again, because when you have something digital, it can be attacked from anywhere. If you have something on paper, it can only be attacked where the paper is.
Within.
Right? So do we want something that has an attack surface this big, or do we want something with an attack surface only this big?
Right.
Well, when it's our elections, we need to reduce the attack surface as much as possible. And we can do that. We can have a very, very safe, secure system, and then we can still have a layer of transparency on top of that that allows us to cross-check everything, the digital side. But the digital side is all read-only.
Okay.
Right? The core is always the paper. So if someone does get in and hack the digital, it doesn't matter, because on election day, we use the paper. So that makes that system completely secure, or nearly completely secure.
Right.
And so we do that with our paper voter rolls. Then we lock our voter registration 30 days prior to an election. It's important to lock it with a gap, because you don't want new registrations rolling in that time period where there isn't adequate time available to ensure the eligibility of those voters.
Gotta
And
vet
plus,
everybody. Yep.
yeah, and our election staff, they're crazed before an election because that's the hardest time of their life anyway. So the last thing they need is a bunch of voter registrations coming in while they're trying to get ready for the election. So it just makes logical sense to lock the rolls 30 days prior. You print paper poll books, because if the rolls are locked, they're not changing. So you can print the paper poll books right then for every person in every precinct. And then each of those paper poll books goes to the precinct. So precinct 8 gets theirs, precinct 9 gets theirs. And then when we go to vote, we vote at the precinct. 1,500 or less voters per precinct. We get checked in on the paper poll book. There's a little box there. We sign our name. They pull our voter registration card that also goes from the county to the respective precinct. They compare the signatures. And the difference is each signature was done in person versus the current system we have no idea where the signatures come from. They can come in digitally. Anyone could put the signatures in.
So how often do you have to register?
I would recommend registering and refreshing your registration, your signature, every 2 years. I think is very reasonable. What we need to do is wipe our rolls, start fresh, start anew. You get registered, and then you just renew your registration every 2 years. You don't have to re-register. You just renew and update your signature if you'd like to.
I think that makes perfect logic, and the reason I'm saying that is I worked real estate, and my real estate background was in working with bank-owned properties.
You know what notaries are then if you work in real estate.
Absolutely.
Right? Because
Absolutely.
you need to have documents notarized.
Absolutely.
And the reason you have documents notarized is to guarantee the
Guarantee
signature is the person that it's supposed to be, right?
Exactly.
So that's why in our voter registration cards that we fill out at the county, our county officials should be notaries also. And every voter registration card should be notarized. That way we know that signature actually belongs to the voter.
To the voter. Yep, it makes good sense.
And they're showing an ID when they register, because I know I was a notary, so you always have the license number that you're putting in beside it, or a state ID. It wouldn't have to be a driver's license. It could be a state ID.
State ID, right.
But such a simple step. It's already a process that's established. It's got a legal precedent. And if you think about that, anything in court or anything in real estate requires a notary.
It does.
Right? And what's the most valuable thing? What's the most valuable asset any of us has? It's not our house. Even if it's a $2 million house, it's not the house. What is it?
It's who we are. It's our signature.
It's our ballot.
Ballot. Yeah.
It's our voice. Our ability to vote is the most valuable asset any American citizen has. So how on earth would we not at least make sure that our signature that allows that person to vote with the eligibility in the county, why on earth would we not require a notarized signature?
And so in yours, then also that you'd have same-day voting, 1 day.
1 day voting. Yeah. Some people confuse like same day registration with 1 day voting.
1 day voting.
No, yeah, just 1 day voting. 1 day holiday.
Right.
In person,
the holiday is
on
a
paper.
great idea.
The holiday's a no-brainer.
Well, it used to be years ago. That's what it was a holiday. Everything shut down, so you could go vote.
She's older than I am. I don't
I
remember
know.
that.
I know.
Well, and why was it a holiday? Because we voted in public buildings.
Right. We had to go.
And this building had to be closed.
Yes.
So that was the holiday allowed us to be able to repurpose that building for voting.
For voting. Yes.
So when they stopped doing that, all of a sudden all these public buildings became inaccessible for voting. And then when you have a voting period that's a month long, you can't shut down a school for a month.
Right.
So what they've done is they've gradually changed all these laws to push the citizens further and further away to channelize them into voting via insecure methods like mail instead of secure methods like in person. And also, insecure way to vote is early. And the reason why early voting is so dangerous is because the bad actors that manipulate elections, of which there are people out there that do it professionally, early voting allows them to manipulate elections with ease because it's all a numbers game. And if they get to know the numbers earlier on, even without tabulation, they can still watch who votes, and they know how every single person is going to vote. There's already a profile in every voter in the United States.
Right.
So all they have to know is if the person voted, they can build a model of the election results without ever looking at ballots. And then
So
they
that's
can
how
manipulate
come they
the
get
elections.
those early election results that they do.
Oh,
is
that's
straight off
interesting.
of those profiles.
And that's why the ballot tracks is not for us. It's not for us to track our ballots, even though we're told it is. That's their excuse to build ballot tracks. Ballot tracks is actually for the bad guys to be able to watch people that vote by mail. And the electronic poll books are not just for the convenience at the polling center. It's so people outside the voting center can monitor who's showing up to vote. And with that, those two pieces of information, they can build a model of the election results. They know exactly what they need to shift the results by. And then with mail-in voting and early voting, they just stuff the ballots in the mail, and there's no way to know who actually filled those ballots out. It's impossible with a mail-in ballot, when it's received, to know who actually filled the ballot out. We see a signature on the front, and then we are just making an assumption that the signature on the front, if it verifies, is the same voter that filled the ballot out.
Right.
But I can tell you, there is no one that can prove who actually filled that ballot out.
Unless it's the person themselves. Right.
Well, no, what do you mean the
That
person that
actually
opened it?
did vote.
Well, there's no if the county gets an envelope,
Right.
Right.
They
Okay.
can't tell. And I
there's
understand
there's
that.
no way to know.
Right.
And
Who
I-
filled out the ballot inside.
Right.
There's no way to know who filled out the ballot inside. So if there's no way to know who filled out the ballot inside a mail-in ballot, then there's no way to determine if they were an eligible voter, right?
Right.
And if there's no way to determine if they were an eligible voter, how are we tabulating a ballot with an unknown eligibility? Wouldn't that be illegal? Because only eligible voters
Right.
are supposed to
Right.
tabulate, right?
And if you can prove it, then
And there's
There's
no
a-
there's no
there's-
way, right? And so I know there are people out there that have actually admitted to filling in ballots for other people, for third parties, filling in ballots for their family members.
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
that's illegal, isn't it?
It is. It is.
right.
But I know they do it too. I mean, I'm with you. I understand that.
Yeah.
And I know they do.
So we've got that we want to go back to in-person voting, paper, and what's your mission right now, and how soon do you think what needs to happen for in-person one-day voting.
Well, we know we can do it because we did it for 150 years.
Right.
Over that.
Yeah, we know there's no question.
We know
on
it's
that.
possible. There's no question. The only thing stopping us from doing it is the will.
Right.
That's it. So we have to create the will. Now, we've got criminals that are benefiting from a corrupted election system. So they don't want to let the system go.
Right.
So you're never going to convince a criminal to change their mind and say, yes, we should go back to hand count.
Right.
Because if we do that, they don't get their power anymore. But the people in the middle that have believed these constant lies and this constant deception from the criminals, trying to convince them that the current systems are just fine, those people we can educate. Most of them we can educate. Now, sometimes it's a little bit of an art form, and some people require a little bit different education. Some people you can just sit down and you can walk through the facts and they'll actually look at them. Some of them require other things, like maybe a bat. I'm just kidding. That's the last resort.
That's the last resort.
Yes.
Just a quick question for you about people who are overseas and their ballots and their voting. How would you handle that?
So how that should be handled. So first of all, an absentee ballot makes our system susceptible to manipulation. Any absentee ballot, because as we explained, absentee is the same thing as mail. An absentee ballot, if anyone doesn't know what absentee ballot means, absentee means you're voting without being there. That's why the word absentee. So when you're not there and a ballot just shows up, how does anyone know the ballot that showed up is actually the ballot that you filled out wherever you were, right? You could have filled out a ballot, let's say in Italy. Let's say you're in the military, and I don't know why, you probably wouldn't be in Italy. Let's say Iraq. You're in Iraq, and if we're not even in Iraq anymore. Ukraine. We're still
wherever you are.
Right, we're still fighting.
Are.
For some reason, we are trying to create this war between Ukraine and Russia, which is ridiculous. Anyway, so let's say we've got someone in the military, and they're out in Ukraine, and they fill out a ballot, and then they mail it in. How do you know when that ballot arrives back that that's the ballot that person filled out? How do you know it hasn't been swapped midway with a different ballot?
So could you do something with fingerprints?
You could, but fingerprints can be copied too.
Well, and
right?
the problem is too that it's supposed to be a secret ballot. That's the whole
And it's supposed to be a secret ballot. So here's the problem. When we have absentee ballots, it's like creating a hole in the boat. And we can take on water that way. It's an abuse vector. And when you create a hole, security hole in a system, you've got to add extra layers to make up for it. The last thing you do is you create one hole and then say, oh, let's make 1 million more holes. And that's essentially what we've done. We know absentee voting, absentee ballots are dangerous for the election because it's an avenue for potential fraud.
Right.
So if we know it's an avenue for potential fraud, why on earth would we open it up to the whole state and force everyone to mail in their ballots?
Exactly.
I mean, it's the stupidest thing ever. Only an idiot or a criminal would actually do that. So we still have to allow people to vote. Now, they have to understand if they're not going to be there and someone makes a concession to allow them to vote absentee, it's a give and take, right? If you're getting a concession to vote absentee, you're giving something up. You can't have the best of both worlds. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
So what you're actually giving up is you're giving up your ballot secrecy when you do that, because technically on that envelope that you're sending in has your name and on the inside is your ballot. So if someone wanted to see how you voted, it's technically possible they could just look at the outside, see your name, open up the envelope, take your ballot out, and they could see exactly how you voted. There's a risk that's inherent with absentee voting. That's why absentee voting is not a good idea. One of the reasons it's not a good idea because it violates secrecy of the ballot. But it's better than nothing. Now, what I would think would be even better is if someone mails in a ballot from overseas, a bad actor could actually swap that ballot with a different ballot by the time it got back to the county. And there's no way to detect that happened. So what I would want to do, if I'm overseas and I already know that absentee ballot could potentially violate my ballot secrecy anyway, I would rather have ballot integrity than ballot secrecy. So what I would do if I was voting overseas, how I would like this to happen, is I mail in that absentee ballot. and it goes back to my precinct where I'm registered to vote, and it's not processed by anyone but the people in my precinct, my neighbors. And when it gets to processing time, they pick it up. It's an absentee ballot, and if I mark it, here's what I think I should do. I should be able to mark it on the inside that I would like a phone call to confirm the choices on the ballot.
Oh, that's a good idea.
That's an idea. Yes.
Right? And then if that were to happen, they'd open it up after the SIGVER and whatnot. They'd see that check mark, and they'd say, okay, we got a call to verify this. And then they call the phone number that's on the voter registration at security, and they say, okay, we've received your ballot. Would you like to confirm your choices?
Great idea.
If I was an absentee voter and I'm violating my ballot secrecy anyway, that would give me integrity for my ballot. That's how I think we should do it.
And it's not like Tammany Hall where you're stuffing ballots and union leaders were saying, let's see, we want to make sure you voted the right way.
Right.
It's a different
Yeah.
group.
So I think that's one way we
taking
could
care
do it. And then also in that, I did mention, and everyone should pick this up, that absentee ballot should only get processed by the precinct of where I'm registered to vote. It shouldn't go to this central processing center. It should go right back to my precinct. I want my neighbors handling my ballot because I trust them more than some random people in the city.
Okay, so now I'm going to go, because I like the idea. I've always thought the paper ballots, it should be less expensive too.
Oh, yeah.
So what are the arguments that you've heard by, say, Bobby Gross against your proposal?
I'm not going to throw Bobby under the bus.
No, don't throw Bobby, but
I'll just say
an election clerk.
election clerks, what I hear some clerks say is, the biggest one is, well, we could never put together that amount of people to do it. We can't find people to do it. And if you think about it, imagine you're a clerk and all of a sudden you are mandated to count everything by hand. Well, the clerk doesn't have the staff to do that.
No.
Right?
No.
There's no way. So the clerk would have to rely on the citizens. What clerk has a directory of citizens that are ready to hand count?
Right,
None.
right.
So what can we do to get rid of that argument? To mitigate that argument,
Well, sign up.
what we can do in the county level is we can set up, we can self-organize counting groups, ballot counting groups, hand counting groups all across the county. We can put all those people together. We can get everyone trained up.
Yep.
We could do all the heavy lifting for the clerk. And we could have everyone signed up, trained and signed up and committed to doing it. And then
Well, and
you walk
it's just
in.
one day, because I think
Yes.
that has been the problem too, is you're looking for election clerks that can contribute weeks, and you're asking one day.
One day.
I think that would make a huge difference.
It's one day. It's real easy. It's actually fun. And when I go out and ask people, it's almost an overwhelmingly, yes, absolutely, I'll hand count ballots. And
It's a patriotic thing. I mean,
Right.
that
it's your
lets you serve your country
It gives you your
in a
freedom.
different way. Yeah.
Right? So if you want to have guaranteed freedom, you count dots on a piece of paper.
That's right.
And we don't need everyone to do it. You just need 1 to 2%. So if we can't find, a 1,500 voter precinct,
1,500, yeah.
can we really not find 15 to 30 people out of 1,500 that would do it? I guarantee if you gave me 1,500 people and I asked in a room full of 1,500 people, raise your hand if you'll hand count ballots, I guarantee well over 30 people are going to raise their hand.
Yes, they will.
No problem. So then all you have to do is you find those people, you set up and train, and we are ready to go. Now, we already did this, right? We know it's possible.
Right,
We
we've
used
done
to
it in
do
the
it all the
past.
time.
Right.
So we can do it again.
Right.
And the other really important thing about that is we have to. We don't have a choice.
Yeah, we're at
This
that
is not
point.
sustainable. We are at that point.
So what are you doing right now? I know you're talking to us this afternoon, and again, how soon do you think you could get people fired up to do this?
Well,
and are you
I can
just
bring
doing it for the
knowledge.
state of Colorado?
No,
or-
I'm traveling all over the country, and,
Wow.
and I'm trying to bring solutions to people and answer questions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a motivator. I cannot sit here and rally the troops myself. I don't have time to put all the teams together, and that's not good use of my time. I'd have to just park in one county and focus in that one county to do that. And I don't know the people in the county. The only county I could do that in would be my county.
Right.
And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to travel from county to county, educating people with the information they need to understand what the solution is so they can create the will among their citizens to push this forward, that they can create those hand counting groups. I'm happy to provide all the resources. I can teach you how to hand count. It's really easy, counting dots on a piece of paper. There's some ways to do it more efficient than other ways. But the people in the county have to be the ones that sit and actually organize that and put it all together.
Well, I think you can get the people interested in doing that. I don't think that's a problem. I think the problem could be what statutes need to be changed in order to go back to a paper ballot. Is it because aren't the statutes saying this is how we do
We already
elections?
have a paper ballot. And so this is, sorry
You're
about the
fine.
phone calls. I get lots of. We already have a paper ballot. So be careful, don't fall into their trap, because if we call it the paper ballot, the people in Colorado say, up top at Colorado, you know, the corrupt ones, you know who you're talking about, right? They will say, well, we already have paper ballots, little peasants. Could they pat us on the head? You already have paper ballots.
Right.
So it's not the paper ballot. It's hand-counted paper ballots. That's the big difference at the precinct, not in these central tabulation centers.
But are there any laws that are standing in the way currently of
Everyone's
doing it
got
that way?
everyone's got to look those up for themselves. Every state is different. There are some state laws that in some states may prohibit it, but most states, a lot of times the citizens are told that the law doesn't allow them to hand count. But if they actually drill down and demand, okay, what law? Prove it. Show me the law. There isn't actually a law. In fact, a lot of states allow hand counting, but they don't tell you.
So, but it's not only the hand counting that's the problem. It's also the registering your ballot, not registering your ballots, but your
Voter registration. Yeah, paper voter registration needs to happen. This is it's a systemic issue, right? We have many parts of the system that are broken, and we need a holistic solution to really fix all this. Any one thing is not going to fix the whole thing.
Right.
We do have to fix a number of different things, and the way to do it, the best way to do it, just rip the Band-Aid off and replace the current election system, which is a total disaster, with a very simple one. I've even listed exactly how it needs to work very well. It's at handcountroadshow.org/PEP, PEP. Like, it stands for Progressive Election Platform. And some people have told me, well, Mark, progressive is a word that the left uses. Yeah, they're not going to, I'm kind of done with them stealing words. And I use progressive to screw with them anyway. So that's why I call it the Progressive Election Plan. And if you go to handcountroadshow.org and you click on the big red button on the front page, it'll also take you right to that. But I want to give people a framework. That's the target. Now, we really should, as Americans, we just need to rip that Band-Aid off and go to that system to fix this. Otherwise, we can't sustain 15-year transitionary period. It'll never happen. These people want to destroy our country. They seriously do, and they're doing it through our elections. We have a tiny window. We don't have time to wait. We need to do this all at once. And maybe there'll be a little order coming from up top mandating a certain type of federal election that will be required to be run a certain way. And if that comes, that's everyone's opportunity to push this across the board. Because if you have to do it for the federal races, you may as well just do it for all of them.
For all
Well,
of them.
you would think.
Yes.
At least
That would be
and the-
logical.
yes.
Logical.
Yes.
Well, no, I think that would be how you would have to do it, because there's no point in doing just the federal and doing two separate elections.
Well, be ready for that fight, because if an order does come that requires federal elections to be run a certain way, if you happen to live in a corrupt state with a bunch of corrupt people in the state running the state, they might be so stupid and bold that they say, we want to run our state elections the old corrupt way, and then we'll just do the federal elections the non-corrupt way. And they may try to do that. I wouldn't recommend it if I were them, but they may try to do that. So be ready
And why
to deal
wouldn't
with
you
that.
recommend that?
Because I don't think the citizens are going to like it too much. And at some point, the citizens might just realize this is their country, not the state government's country. And this land here belongs to us, not the criminals that are running the state. And the citizens might just at some point say, no, we've had enough. We will run our elections ourselves, and we'll tell you what the results are. And that's how it's going to end, unless we do it the nice way. And I really would like to do it the nice way. I don't want it to go the other way, because no one's going to like that.
Right.
But if, in order for all of us to live in this land together, the only way to peacefully resolve this is to return elections to the people. Fair elections are the only non-violent means of settling political discourse. And we have a lot of political discourse. So I really want to do this non-violently. There's no reason why we shouldn't do it non-violently.
Well, and then the next election is 2026, but the federal election wouldn't be until 2028, so...
But there are some... I think there's some races that are federal type races.
Oh.
But regardless, the people, what they can do right now is they can vote in person on election day. And everyone should be doing that. No more early voting, no more mail-in voting. Refuse to mail-in vote. I would send in petitions, I'd send in letters to your election department telling them how much you don't want mail-in voting. It's not going to change. They can't stop doing it because it's the state law, but it would at least let everyone know for sure that no, the public doesn't want mail-in ballots. The public wants secure voting.
Well, maybe it would be more effective to do that to your local and to Secretary of State and to your governor. And
well, I can tell you, our Secretary of State
we know.
doesn't care, right?
Right.
But put her on notice anyway. Yeah, and same thing with the governor. I mean, I do feel a little bit bad for these people because I can't imagine there's no way they actually have true love in their hearts for treating the citizens that they are supposed to serve like they've been treating them. Okay. And I think there's obviously a demonic component to all of them. And I pity them, but I'm not going to give them any leeway. This country belongs to us, and we're taking it back.
Okay. And you're traveling from here. Where do you go?
So I'll be in Colorado for another month, and then I'm hitting the road for Hand Count Roadshow 2.0, and I'm going to go to Utah, Nevada, California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and I'm going to make my way down south, and I should be able to hit, Nebraska and Kansas, Oklahoma, and then I'm going to probably be there about December of this year. And then I'll take a couple-week break over the holidays because everyone's so busy with everything. I can't schedule any events anyway.
Right.
So I'll take a breather. I might sleep for a day. And then I'm going to hop back in and I'm going to head out east. And I'm going to go east and northeast and then wrap back west over the next year. I'm going to do everything I can to the last minute of the 26 elections and make sure that we do everything possible to ensure the integrity of the real votes, ensure that our elections accurately represent the will of the people and mitigate as much manipulation as possible and get truth out there and all the righteousness we can.
Okay, one more time, your website.
handcountroadshow.org.
I was going to put .com, so I was lucky he didn't.
A lot of people do put .com. Yeah, it's handcountroadshow.org. Yes. Yeah.
And just the mom questioning me. So, do you have another job at the same time? Or is this your total way of making a living?
Well, I had a job. I had a couple of jobs, and unfortunately, when I decided to do this, I had to kind of pick one or the other. So, I'm doing the stupidest thing ever. I'm living out of what's left of my savings account while doing this, and I will likely end up with an empty account at the end of it, and I might be living in my trailer that I'm traveling around in right now at the very end of all this.
Wow.
But I'm going to let the citizens.
Do maybe
I'm going
love
to pray.
offerings or
I'm going to
something.
pray that the citizens take care of me on that, and I'm going to do everything I can to save and their freedoms so they can pass that freedom on to their kids and their grandkids. Because we all need to make some type of a contribution to society, in our lives. And I didn't know what mine was going to be. And then I realized, and God's guided me this whole time on this, and I realized this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to help return freedom to my fellow citizens of this country. So if I lose everything that I've spent my life building. I know it's the job God's got me on, that I'm supposed to do this, and I'm just following God's will as the soldier that I'm supposed to be.
The faithful servant.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being on. I would
Yes.
never have known about you had it not been that you coming to stand. So that's very interesting.
Well, I'm glad I got to come.
Excellent.
Well, you've been watching Mesa County Compass. This is the facts as we know them, the truth as we see it. You decide. Thank you,
Thank
Mark.
you, Mark.
Thank you both very
Appreciate
much.
it.